The Aeneid is a revolutionary work in many ways. It represents a growing awareness of the inwardness of the individual. This can be seen most clearly by comparison with the Homeric epics. In Homer, the main focus is on the outward events, the Trojan War and the wanderings of Odysseus. These are the great struggles that occupy the Homeric heroes. While there's also no shortage of external action in the Aeneid, there's something significantly different. Aeneas also endures protracted wanderings at sea before he reaches his destination. He also engages in war and violent conflict like the Homeric heroes. But yet the real conflict is not these external struggles, but rather the internal one in his own soul. The story of the Aeneid is about Aeneas' struggle with his own desires and inclinations, which are in conflict with his duty. He must give up his own happiness for the sake of others. The epic struggle thus shifts from the outward sphere to inward. In the Roman world, this principle of inwardness was something new, and in time it continued to grow. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who was born some 60 years after Virgil and died in 65 AD, can be seen as continuing the development of this concept. In his moral letters, he urges people to shun external things such as fame and wealth. Instead, people should turn their focus inward to the cultivation of the mind or the soul. Seneca issues the injunction to his interlocutor, quote, "Retire into yourself as much as you can." The idea of virtue changes from being something external associated with military prowess to being something internal associated with the ethical or moral character of the individual. Likewise, freedom is no longer conceived in the social political sphere, for example, as being a free person or a slave, or as being a free state or one subject to the control of an imperial power. Now the idea of freedom shifts to the inward sphere of the individual. Being free means being in control of one's own desires and drives. For the Stoics, the external sphere becomes a matter of indifference. This shift from the outward to the inward marks a major revolution in thought. The Aeneid contains in many ways ideas that point to our modern ways of thinking. Perhaps most importantly is the idea of judgment in the afterlife, with rewards for the virtuous and punishments for the wicked. There appears here a new awareness of the importance of the individual, but yet the overarching motif of the story is a rather conservative one. The hero Aeneas is not a character who represents a celebration of individuality and subjectivity. Instead, he's constantly called upon to sacrifice his own personal wishes and desires and to do what is demanded of him by the gods and his people. As he frequently repeats, he does not act on his own free will, but is compelled to do so by forces greater than himself. This is the traditional way of thinking that subordinates the individual to the customs, traditions, and interests of the family or the larger group. The particular interests of the individual are not thought to matter. But it could be argued that the Aeneid, while still very traditional in this regard, nonetheless represents a development in the concept of subjective freedom. Aeneas does not simply silently accept his fate and follow his duty without a word. On the contrary, he's constantly portrayed as being in conflict with it. He wants to do something else and must be constantly reminded to get back to doing his duty. Thus, the story recognizes and portrays with some sympathy this inward sphere of subjectivity, although it's ultimately trumped by the higher demands of duty. But Virgil clearly understands the importance of this subjective side of human beings, which in the ancient world was continually repressed and rarely given the chance to unfold as individuals might wish. This is a principle that will be further developed in Stoicism and Christianity.